Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. And I am so excited about getting on the road tomorrow morning, driving over to Knoxville, or I guess up to Knoxville, being there in Neyland Stadium with so many of you Saturday evening to watch the Georgia Bulldogs and the Tennessee Vols. Looking forward to having UGA football back after a week away, and looking forward to setting the stage one final time for the game here on our program today. We'll talk to Jeff Sintel about some recruiting stuff, but also his feeling about the atmosphere in and around the game in Neyland Stadium tomorrow. We're going to hear from both the coaches on today's show, Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt. We're going to kind of have some fun with what I think has been kind of an interesting demeanor from Smart this week. We'll tell you all about that. And one more thing from Smart this week that I thought was pretty interesting that I kind of want to circle back on in terms of the spirit that he seems to see in his team right now that I don't know is necessarily all that common in football at large at the moment, but Smart seems to think that Georgia has it. I'll explain why that's a good thing here over the course of our program there as well. So we're going to have a great Friday. I'm really glad you're with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is presented by Kroger. More ways to save fresh food, low prices at Kroger.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I was joking about this last night on our Marlowe's Matchup, the show that we do every Thursday with our buddy John Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American. John kind of agreed with me that it's kind of a tough week for Kirby Smart, right? And I noticed watching some of the videos up at our DawgNation YouTube page, and by the way, if you're not subscribing to DawgNation on YouTube, you definitely need to do that to make sure you see everything that a Georgia coach and player says each week in Athens. DawgNation YouTube, the same way that many of you watch the show, is a great way to stay plugged in on what's happening there in Athens as well. But I was watching some of the videos this week because I don't get to be in Athens all that much. I'm always here in this studio. But watching some of those videos this week, it was really interesting to watch Kirby. I think he was I think the word I would use is ornery. Now, I know I sound a little bit like Yosemite Sam when I say that, but ornery just seems to be the right description if I'm even saying the word the right way. Like a little angry, a little bit more so than usual, maybe a little bit more terse than usual, because Smart's dealing with a difficult dilemma. You know, the average person, me, you, pretty much everyone who's a part of our audience right now, we look at Georgia's opponent on Saturday and we see Tennessee, and by almost any estimation, this is a Vols team that's not very good. They lost to Georgia State. They looked terrible against Florida. They've really only beaten up on Chattanooga. And other than that, it's just been really, really tough sledding for Tennessee all season long. Bad disaster late against BYU, for instance. This is just not a good football team. But while I have the freedom to say that, and if you're watching and observing, you have the freedom to say that, it's honestly not a good job not a good thing for the Georgia players to think that, or certainly say that. And Kirby Smart has got an important job this week of making sure they don't read those press clippings. And we've kind of highlighted some of the soap opera drama and the negativity coming out of Knoxville, and a lot of my audience being big Georgia fans, especially I've heard from so many people who live in, like, say, Chattanooga area this week, and some of those kind of divided territories where you got a good pocket of Georgia fans and a good pocket of Tennessee fans there as well. There are a lot of Georgia fans who live in the north part of our state, or even in the state of Tennessee, who revel in how bad things are in Knoxville at the moment, and how much Jeremy Pruitt has seemingly contributed to some of this negativity. There are Georgia fans who love that. But Georgia coach Kirby Smart's got to make sure he does a good job of blocking all that out. He's got to get his team focused on Tennessee. And the less evidence there is to support the fact that Tennessee's a formidable opponent, the tougher it makes Kirby Smart's job in convincing the Georgia players that is indeed true. So some of the edge I think you've heard from Kirby this week is he's having to try to reach down deep and try to convince us in the media, the fans who are observing all of this, and by proxy, his players themselves, that this is a Tennessee team that needs to be taken seriously on Saturday. But Kirby has done his part to try to do that just a little bit. Certainly, he's got great respect for Jeremy Pruitt. Here is some of what Kirby has said about Pruitt in particular and Tennessee in general this week. Here's Kirby Smart.
I think Jeremy's doing a great job with the situation he's in. I certainly know this. They play hard. They play physical. You can turn the tape on in the third and fourth quarter and watch how their kids compete, and they play the game the right way.
That's exactly what I would say if I was trying to keep that coach in that job, in that place forever and ever and ever in perpetuity. Right now, Kirby Smart, as much as he's built up the Georgia program, one of the great allies he has at the moment is the fact that the rest of the SEC East is kind of miserable. Florida has a high ranking. We don't think they're very good. And if you're a Georgia fan right now, you kind of enjoy the state of the SEC East. Kirby Smart saying, I think Jeremy Pruitt's doing a great job. There's a way to kind of take that as a little sarcastic, as if you want to keep Pruitt in place forever. In Smart's case, though, I think I'm going to take him more at his word on this. I do think he has respect for the ways in which Jeremy Pruitt's trying to build the Tennessee program. And I think there are a lot of reasons in which what Pruitt's trying to build up at Tennessee, it is just a little bit harder than what Smart was able to do at Georgia. First of all, when Smart was building up Georgia, kind of a shaky 2016, breakthrough year in 2017. There was no dominant power in the SEC East at that time to prevent that from happening. Obviously, Pruitt has that now at Tennessee, which makes that tough climb even tougher. And of course, Georgia is trying to stay where it is on top of the SEC East and trying to keep Tennessee down where it is, kind of floundering and fledgling. And this Saturday's game will go a long way towards making sure that remains the case. And from Kirby's standpoint, at least it seems the case that making his team and his players believe that the Vols are a threat is a part of the game plan for success on Saturday night. And he talked more to the media this week about why, from his perspective, that shouldn't be that hard of a case to make, despite the Vols' pretty miserable record. More from Kirby Smart.
The games they've been in this year, they've just had a lot of turnovers, and their defense has actually forced a lot of turnovers. They've just turned the ball over quite a bit, and it's hurt them some in some games. But got a good football team, got a lot of players that we recruited, got a lot of respect for the coaching staff. I think they do a great job. This will be a tough ball game at night at their place, and our guys got to get ready to play.
I don't believe a word of what Smart is saying there for the most part. I don't think it's the truth. Tennessee's a bad football team. But if you're a fan of Georgia, that's exactly what you want to hear your coach saying going into the game here on Saturday. That's the focus and determination that's necessary, and sometimes you have to conjure up a little bit of a myth about your opponent to make sure the focus is where it needs to be, because Georgia's focus, one way or another, does need to be squarely on the Vols on Saturday, if for no other reason than this game, the South Carolina game, the Kentucky game, set the stage for the ones that will really truly matter the most starting the month of November when you play rivals like Florida and Auburn. More on them in a moment. But before I get to that, and before I kind of touch on the fact that while the players may buy into Smart's language, the fans themselves may have their eye wandering in a different direction on Saturday, let me also give you a chance to hear Jeremy Pruitt returning the favor. Smart heaping praise on Tennessee over and over again this week. Certainly Jeremy Pruitt's kind of cut from the same cloth. He had plenty of complimentary things to say about Georgia and quarterback Jake Fromm in particular. Here's a little bit of the opposing coach for a moment.
It's probably the best Georgia team that I can ever remember at this point in time in the season. It starts with Jake Fromm. To me, he does as good a job as anybody in the country, and maybe as anybody as I've ever coached against, as far as keeping their offense in positive situations. He takes care of the football, gets the ball out of his hand, controls the protection, keeps them in positive run plays.
So both coaches right now kind of saying the right thing. You hear Pruitt there on Georgia. You heard Kirby a minute ago on Tennessee. And it's just kind of the recipe for how you get this one together. And my guess is that Georgia, for the most part right now, is the kind of program and team that is locked in on Kirby Smart's message. And they will be focused on Saturday night. Neyland Stadium, no matter how many Georgia fans end up being there, will be at least a hostile place to play at the beginning of the game. And my guess is Georgia's going to be ready for that, and the focus of the players will help that be the case. However, I think there is at least some chance, especially those who are tailgating around Neyland Stadium before the game on Saturday, or those of you who are kind of gathering in a bunch of Georgia fans into your house to have one of the watch parties on Saturday night. I know you're going to Kroger and getting stocked up for all the goods there for that. Maybe getting there a little early, maybe watching a little bit of that game at 3:30 between Florida and Auburn, because let's face it, as I said a moment ago, while the Tennessee game historically has been important for Georgia, and it's the next game up for the team and coaches themselves, I think the real intrigue this weekend for many Georgia fans is, well, just how good is Auburn really going on the road now against a top 10 opponent, and just how good is Florida? Good enough to beat this team here today on Saturday as a slight point spread underdog, maybe fulfilling some of the big talk that came out of Gainesville during the spring and the summer? And exactly how does Georgia compare to these two teams? Hard to necessarily tell with them playing each other on Saturday, but that won't stop some Georgia fans from trying to, imagining what it's going to look like in the month of November when Georgia faces up against both those programs, historic rivals that they are. With that in mind, I thought that Brian Edwards from a website called Major Wager had kind of an interesting nugget here this week, citing some data from the Westgate Superbook in Las Vegas. there's been a little bit of a line point spread change for Georgia with those two opponents we just mentioned, Florida and Auburn, to come later on, taking battle against each other this Saturday. What Edwards writes for Major Wager, as I said before, citing the Westgate Superbook, is that if you want to do a look-ahead line on Georgia against Florida or Georgia against Auburn right now, a little bit different than it would have been in the summer. Edwards says that Georgia's now a 10-point favorite versus Florida on November 2nd in Jacksonville, and a 3.5-point favorite against Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Now, he goes on to cite that Gus Malzahn 6-2 against the spread as a home underdog during his 7-year tenure, including outright wins over Georgia and Bama in 2017. And he also says that Auburn gets 2 weeks to prepare for Georgia there that day. Georgia has to play Missouri the week before it takes on Auburn. So interesting that the point spread for Georgia against Florida, which at one point in time was actually only about 3 or 4 points if you want to go back to the summer, is now up to 10 at the Westgate, which is kind of one of the market-leading sports books in Las Vegas. And the Auburn line, which at one point in time, I want to say if you went back to July, you could have found that Georgia minus 7.5 or something like that on the road, now down to just 3.5. So apparently the betting folks think over the course of 5 weeks of football that Florida's a little worse than they first thought they were going to be. Auburn may be a little bit better. But for now, they are both undefeated. They will play each other on Saturday as a potential preview of which of these two teams might be the most challenging opponent for Georgia coming up the month of November. And my guess is, as Georgia fans are getting ready to watch their game against the Vols, there will be a little bit of a peek at what's going to happen in Gainesville, Florida as well. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. It is great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com, as well as the Apple Player and the Google Player and kind of all that stuff in between. Really glad to have you with us and really appreciate Kroger for making the entire show possible. As I said, let me remind you of something really cool about our good friends there at Kroger as well. Do not forget that Halloween is on the way, and there's a great opportunity for you to take care of everything that you need there at Kroger for that. You can save on everything from like home decor, costumes, all the candy and everything else. And in fact, big-time savings on Hershey's candy and assorted sweet tarts when you use your Kroger card here this week. So take care of that, use that, and you can do some big-time Halloween shopping right there with your friends at Kroger. Really good stuff. We've got Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment on DawgNation Daily. Before we talk to Jeff about the happenings in and around Knoxville and the latest in the recruiting scene, let's also go around the doghouse here as well, brought to you today by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. And I want to take a moment to go back and circle back on something that we talked about a little earlier in the week, something that Kirby Smart said that may not be quite as common around football now as we might think. Now, as a way of setting this up, I want to do something I don't normally do. I want to play a clip from an NFL play. This is something I heard the other day, and it kind of stopped me in my tracks when I heard it. It's Delanie Walker. He's a longtime tight end for the Tennessee Titans, or a longtime tight end in the NFL, plays for the Titans now. And he was kind of talking about the current state of the modern NFL. Titans had been struggling, did win in Atlanta last week, but had been kind of struggling up to that point in time, and the feeling, the mood in an NFL locker room right now for a team that's struggling. Well, Walker, who's been around the sport for a while, seems to think the modern player doesn't always take some of this kind of stuff too well. I thought this was interesting from Walker, and it's going to set us up to say something about Kirby Smart in a moment. Let me let you hear the tight end from the Tennessee Titans.
When I came in the league in 2006, I know that's a long time ago, the atmosphere was a lot different. You know, we were 1-2, it'd be pissed off guys walking around here, calling guys out, team meeting without the coaches. But today's football, it's a lot different. Yeah. A lot of these guys can't take that. A lot of these guys don't like to be called out. They want to fight or they want to be traded. And that's pretty much where we're going today with this game. Is as you can see, the rule changes and everything is just different.
So Delanie Walker says there are a lot of guys in the NFL now, on his team in particular, that don't want to get called out. If things aren't going well and you blame them for that, they want to fight. They want to get edgy about that. They want to push back on that. They can't take criticism. It's the modern game, he says, the modern player within that game. Now, I don't know if Walker's right or not. I'm not in NFL locker rooms, and I haven't been around the league as long as he has to make that comparison one way or another. But it's pretty interesting that a player in the NFL would say that about his own teammates. And if Walker feels that way, we're left to assume that maybe other players in football kind of feel that same way too. And I wanted to play that for you as a backdrop for something that Kirby Smart said this week, because I think it's interesting. If Walker's correct and that issue plagues football a little bit at the NFL level, I think the good news is apparently at Georgia, that's not the case at all. And as Georgia moves through a month of October where it needs to improve, to get ready for a month of November where it needs to dominate historic rivals, key games, setting itself up for a return to the college football playoff, the absence of the attitude that Walker just described there, I think for Georgia will be an ally that it uses on the way at every goal that it tries to achieve this season. So keep Walker's words in your mind and contrast that to something that Kirby Smart said this week.
Our days that haven't been great at practice, they've responded well to. That's usually the first sign that they're the right kind of guys. And then adversity strikes, and they respond to that. I mean, we're not easy on them out there. We're tough on them, and they embrace it. And the older guys kind of lead with a message of, they're pushing you because they want you to be great. And that's usually the sign of a good team that can handle, number one, adversity, but number two, tough coaching.
I mean, listen to that from Kirby Smart there for a moment. A team that can handle tough coaching. He says that's what Georgia is. Compared to some guys in football, maybe that's not quite as common around the sport as it used to be. I think that's good news for Georgia. I think a culture of coaching is still a pretty important thing. I think it's still the kind of thing that helps you get to where you want to go. To be able to take criticism and be able to handle, hard, aggressive coaching and designed to make you better. The fact that Georgia has that, I think, as I said before, is probably a pretty good thing. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp, and something that's definitely not a good thing, and you can't sugarcoat this. That's the divorce process. If you're going through it, you know how difficult it can be, and you know how scary it can be as well for your financial future, for your relationship with your children, for your own peace of mind, your own quality of life. It may seem like you're in a situation now that you'll never be able to get out of, never be able to be made to feel whole again. The good news, though, is that can end up being a success story. You can come out of this feeling better about everything all the way around, but you've got to have an advocate on your side. You've got to have my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. You can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. You can get in touch with them. They've got free resources available for you, podcasts, blog posts, everything like that. You can also reach out and get a consultation from them. They can set you down a path to be made better and made whole again, but you've got to have them on your side. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. All right, later on, we're going to look more at Georgia versus Tennessee, and I may have something to say as well, but the Auburn-Florida game here as well. We'll kind of cover all those bases before we're done. But for now, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, let's do a little recruiting talk. Let's talk to Jeff Sintel.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff Sintel, great to have you as a part of our program today. A lot of recruiting talk that I want to get into, and some of this is going to involve running backs. We said before we're going to do this probably every time you and I get together now for the foreseeable future. There was also a UGA, I guess, potential recruiting target that announced a commitment elsewhere. We'll kind of get to that before we're done. But before that, let me talk to you a little bit about the situation in Knoxville on Saturday, if you don't mind. First of all, welcome into DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We really appreciate your time today.
Hey, Brandon, good morning. I guess the contract says every day that ends in Y, we're going to talk about 2020 running backs, right?
Yeah, it's probably about true. And I think, part of it is I do believe Georgia needs a second running back, but also the subplot storylines and all this is a little bit fascinating to me. So I think it's kind of an interesting soap opera to follow, if for nothing else. And so we'll kind of get to that coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I guess I'm curious of your thoughts on this, because Pruitt was asked about it this week. Georgia fans have been lighting up message boards about it, including our own forum at forum.dawgnation.com. My comment section has been buzzing about it a little bit. How many Georgia fans are you expecting to see in Neyland Stadium on Saturday? Are we talking about 20,000? Are we talking about more than that? I'm still pretty skeptical that the whole checkerboard thing will actually be able to take place. You need a lot of fans for that to occur, and I don't believe Georgia, one way or another, has quite that many. But if it's 20,000, that's a lot more than most schools take to any road game they go to now. How much of a buzz have you noticed in terms of Georgia fans kind of going and getting their tickets to be in the stadium on Saturday, a venue that at one point in time would have been a pretty big house of horrors for UGA, not so much anymore? What's your sense what the crowd situation is going to be like from a UGA standpoint on Saturday?
Yeah, Brandon, that's a good term there, house of horrors. I think there's a combination of factors for me. I guess the number I think I would point to is maybe 30,000. I think that's legitimate. I would probably say if Georgia is even able to pull off 60, 70%, if DawgNation could pull off 60, 70% of a checkerboard at Neyland Stadium, I might rank that as one of the most impressive fan strength showings by DawgNation so far in the Kirby Smart era. But the only possibility this is happening for Georgia to kind of look like Vanderbilt in Nashville earlier this year is you got the combination of Georgia's strength. It's an SEC East game. You've got Tennessee that's kind of wobbly right now so far this season. I'd imagine a lot of Tennessee Volunteer fans sold their tickets after that Georgia State debacle. I think the number I'm comfortable with thinking about right there is probably 30 to 40,000, and that's a lot. But got to remember, Neyland will hold well over 105K.
Yeah, but now keep this in mind, too, and you may end up being right, and ultimately this number, whether it's 20, 30, whatever, probably doesn't matter a whole lot, but I'm just kind of fascinated by it. If it's 30,000, Jeff, we're talking pretty close to the same number of Georgia fans who go to Jacksonville to see Georgia, Florida. That's a half-house situation. That capacity, I think, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 67,000, upwards of towards 70,000 there in the Jacksonville venue. So you're talking 35 to 40,000 Georgia fans in Jacksonville every year. 30,000 Georgia fans, if it's that much, and somehow I'm led to believe it's probably going to be more like 20 than 30. But if it's 30,000 Georgia fans in Knoxville on Saturday, I don't think you're overstating things at all to say it's one of the most impressive crowd showings that this fan base that's had a lot of these. 30,000 in Knoxville would be huge. Something tells me it probably ends up at being a little bit more like 20. But if I'm wrong and it's more than that, oh my gosh, what a showing that would be in a stadium where at one point in time that would have been considered impossible.
Yeah, impossible is the right way to look at that, Brandon. I think, and I'm just going to play to your crowd a little bit today, I guess. I think the big thing is, will the checkerboard look real in the fourth quarter?
Yeah.
And will it feel like Georgia has half the stadium there in the fourth quarter? I think those are the rim shots you're looking for there, right?
That's exactly right. Let me do one more thing on this, and I want to get serious about recruiting for a moment. In 2017, Georgia gets, if a memory serves, an interception on the first play of the game, and we never really know if that crowd in Neyland that day was set up to be hostile or not. I believe they did try to checkerboard the venue that day, but Georgia, for the most part, kind of ran them out of their own stadium, and we all remember the shots of the end of the game where, as you mentioned before, there were essentially no Tennessee fans in the stadium by the end of the game. And we also know that in other venues where the crowd hasn't quite been run out quite as quickly, Georgia has struggled under Kirby Smart. 2017 Auburn comes to mind. 2018 LSU comes to mind. I do think the early stage of this game will be interesting to see. Does Georgia quiet the crowd from the get-go? However many Tennessee fans that are there, they may be coerced into making some noise if it's a slow start for Georgia. Is Georgia able to remove this from the list of potential hostile venues by doing what it did in 2017, which is throw the haymaker punch from the word go? In a game in which it's not really expected to be close once the final score is reached, how close it is from the beginning, I do think is at least a little bit of an interesting subplot.
Yeah, I think, I get the feeling that the DawgNation fan base right now, from getting a gauge of it on the forum, is folks want to see Georgia come out, establish dominance, and then, let's just say, crush the next or just get a figure four hold submission early in a game. And I guess that's the feeling, what the old school feeling about what championship teams are supposed to look like. Everybody will wisely bring up the Georgia State barometer there, but there's so much affinity for what Georgia does well and the way Georgia's built that on both sides of the ball that they kind of know a lot of those behind the rope secrets about the way both defenses are built. So it'll be very interesting to see what wrinkles that James Coley can bring to this dynamic. Chaney, for all of his worth, will know exactly what a lot of Georgia's key defensive performers are susceptible to from seeing them all the time. But I think, as Kirby Smart always alludes to, what's going to matter is specific plays, man-on-man, assignment on assignment. Let the best player win. I will say one thing that stood out to me this week while perusing a lot of Jeremy Pruitt's thoughts in some of his press conferences this week is he said something about Jake Fromm that I found very interesting, and it's not a thought that he needs to throw it 40 times per game for Georgia to win a national championship. He said that in his time of, going head-to-head with Jake Fromm, he counted his 1 year at Alabama in the national championship game and then he counted last year coming to Athens, which I thought was a very respectable performance for Tennessee last year in Athens. Brian Herrion had to do a lot of good things in the fourth quarter to kind of close the balls out. But he said he thought they've only fooled Jake Fromm twice. And his definition of trick or fool was get him to throw the ball to the wrong spot or trick him in a coverage or disguise something that he didn't see. And he said that's twice in about 160 snaps. I got to say, of all the competitors and all the guys that go against Jake Fromm to say something, I'm going to rank that one up there pretty high to see that a guy like Jeremy Pruitt, even with Alabama's personnel, even thinking about that national championship game against Alabama, where everybody thought that, Jake Fromm didn't have a dominant game-winning performance. I thought it was very interesting to hear Pruitt say that. Over the course of 160 snaps, they've only gotten to 11 or tricked 11 2 times.
We got more with Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, let me give you a quick word from our friends at the Atlanta North Georgia Building Trades Council. So many people that listen to our show every day are, kind of part of those construction trades for a living. And one of the things, if you're doing that kind of work, is you want to get the most money for the work that you're doing. That's what the Atlanta North Georgia Building Trades Council gives you a chance to do. They're dedicated to the economic stability of organized construction workers in North America, creating more work opportunities, living wages, protecting benefits. You can also earn while you learn with no tuition apprentice training. It's up to $100,000 you can earn while serving an apprenticeship, which is actually a really great thing if you think about it. There's employer-paid pension and insurance, and wages are more than up to 30% higher than non-union. Not just for men, it's for women too. Everyone's encouraged to apply. Built on protecting the brotherhood and the sisterhood. That is the Atlanta North Georgia Building Trades Council. Let me give you a couple ways to get in touch with them. It's GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com. The website, once again, GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com, or give them a call, 404-584-0005. That's 404-584-0005. All right, Jeff, let me turn our attention now fully to the recruiting stuff here for a moment. And, you said something on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger on Wednesday that I think we got to address here for a moment. I talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show, but I wanted to follow up with you with a chance to expound upon that. The Zachary Evans thing for right now may be Evans trending away from Georgia, either because no one knows what he's going to do or because there's a growing belief that he might either go to LSU or Texas A&M or one of these other schools that's kind of competing for his services. However, in addition to that, it also seems like you think as of right now, Georgia's chances with a guy like Tank Bigsby or a guy like Don Chaney or a guy like Marshawn Lloyd, those have also diminished as well because of the time that Georgia spent not recruiting those guys back when they were on the open market. So for now, I believe the phrase you used is that Georgia's other running back to pair with Kendall Milton at the moment is more likely to be none of the above, a player to be named later, at least in comparison to the names we've spoken about the most often here. Wanted to give you a chance to expound upon that thought and kind of where you think it might go from here.
Yeah, it's all very interesting right now, and I think it's, perspective I think is always huge in what we try to report, what we try to convey to this ravenous fan base here when we go about our daily work. And first of all, I think the big thing for me is to remember that Georgia is looking for its second running back, 5-star-ish running back, elite running back to pair to the class. And that somehow is the major talking point now for September, October. And I think it's all based on the Zach Evans situation. And, man, this thing, let's just be very casual and open about it. This thing has gone a lot of different ways. It's kind of pinballed back and forth between Georgia lean, the whole beginnings of it, Brandon, where he sets the top 5. He doesn't include either Texas school in there. And then Ohio State drops out. Other schools drop in. And now it seems like the teams du jour are Texas A&M and LSU. Will he get back to Georgia? Does Georgia get an official visit? I'm thinking that will probably happen, but who knows, man? I just think that volatility there has led Georgia down different roads with Tank Bigsby. Don Chaney is currently in Miami commitment. These are things that, man, I think my most realistic scenario for all of it as we get to December, the middle of December, when it's deciding time and everyone sees where everybody's at. And I think Zachary Evans' decision or non-decision, if it's still there at that point where Georgia's a realistic suitor for him, I think that will shape a lot of things But again, you just shake your head a lot of times when you try to apply conjecture to this whole situation, and it makes you wonder if this well-prepared Georgia staff will already have contingencies in place. I think it's going to take some demonstrated efforts for Georgia to push Tank Bigsby away from Auburn. Not even sure if that's possible, and also flip a Don Chaney Jr. away from Miami. That enters in new names. It's the same names we've been talking about. We've been talking about Ashad Clayton. Marshawn Lloyd seems to me a guy that a lot of the scouting perspective on him as you watch him, and it's like, will this guy flip from Maryland? And then if he does, will this guy flip from South Carolina with some fumes of the South Carolina season going in smoke? And will the most likely flip be to Maryland or Penn State? You see some of his senior tape so far, and it doesn't look like he's got a lot more to go. Ability to get to the edge, ability to separate himself. I mean, there's such a difference, Brandon, between Georgia looking at a top 15 running back in the country and then going after the top 5, the elite guys, which is what this program so richly deserves. But and it's kind of been the signature for the team's recruiting efforts at running back. The thing that just keeps popping in my mind, Brandon, every time I see running back highlights of Corey Wren, is I sit there and I go, in a very efficient, tight cap on this class where Georgia probably won't get to 25 signees or slots with this class, and they're going to have to try to find a scholarship kicker somehow eventually through all this. This makes me think that a lot of the things that Corey Wren does reminds me a lot of what James Cook is currently giving Georgia as the 5th running back in the room.
The only problem with that, though, Jeff, is, and I like Wren as a prospect, but he seems small for a wide receiver. I know he does great running back things for his high school team there in Louisiana, but that's also high school in Louisiana. I mean, I've questioned his size at the wide receiver position. I'm definitely going to question that toting the football as well,
Yeah, but intelligent perspective on this, Brandon, leads me to believe, there's a lot of people seeing the numbers that Jahmyr Gibbs is putting up now out of Dalton High School, and don't get me wrong, he looks to me like a top 15 back in the country. He just got an invitation to the All-American Bowl. That's the former U.S. Army All-American game. But you start putting these things together, we know that the type of competition Dalton High goes up against, at least so far, is not the best in the state of Georgia. But then you look at the parallels for there, and Corey Wren's maybe only an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches shorter than Jahmyr Gibbs, and maybe only about 10 pounds, 15 pounds lighter than Jahmyr Gibbs. Both of these guys are way under 200 pounds or under 200 pounds. I think Gibbs is around 190 to 195, and Corey Wren's right around 175, 180. To me, the thought of Georgia going way down in the state of Georgia, maybe down the board a little bit, to get a guy like Gibbs to get a second running back in the class, I just think that's really premature right now, considering his skill set and everything he can do can kind of be paralleled by what Corey Wren's already doing in a veer offense in a tight league, a tough league in New Orleans. And you also got to think about Arian Smith as well. He's another speed burner as well that can give you a lot of that speed off the edges as well.
Yeah, I for the most part kind of agree with you on Gibbs, at least in terms of his fit for Georgia. What he's done for Dalton has been amazing, and I'm not going to ever speak poorly about any football prospect. I'm just not quite so sure that's a great fit for Georgia, but obviously different people may feel differently on that. Let me do one more thing on this topic, then I want to finish with a completely different subject before we're done. So if we look at the seeming distance that's in place between Evans and Georgia now, is this more about Georgia reluctance based on whatever it was that kept him off the field for a couple of weeks for North Shore, or is this more about Evans feeling a stronger pull to a school like Texas A&M that must have an unbelievable pitch right now of please come here and save our running game because the Aggies' run game is terrible, whatever it is that LSU, I guess, is pitching here at the moment as well, or any other school that might, I think, you probably have to include Alabama in that discussion maybe to a certain extent too. Is this more about reluctance on Georgia's part, or is this more about reluctance on Evans' part?
I think it's all about, I don't know if this recruitment has gotten really serious yet. I mean, there's things eventually that, serious where the young man starts taking his officials and it starts becoming real. And a lot of this has been muddied a little bit by the inactivity for him for his North Shore football team over the last 3 or 4 weeks. But there's things like, what does grandma want? Where are my parents going to come see me? Where's my family going to come see me? This sort of thing starts becoming real to a lot of folks the closer. Sometimes people wait on this stuff, Brandon. The closer it gets to an eventual decision. And here's what I know. The fundamental way that recruiting goes, and even though this is a very obtuse recruitment, the way things heat up is there's a lot of buzz because there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of the zenith of a lot of all this Zachary Evans stuff was seemed like he was Instagramming something every other day about Georgia. He took the visit for the cookout. That went well. Everybody's taking pictures together. They've got silencers above their lips, like trying to indicate something. Everybody's holding on to a big secret. And now there hasn't been that, double down of affection and love. And, once teams stop lighting you up, then a lot of recruits always value attention as worth. I think with, Brandon, this is in some ways a labyrinth of things that we almost go through, especially when we have a program like this and we talk about Zachary Evans a lot. You have the zigs and zags, and with this one, even if he'd have committed to Georgia 3 weeks ago, even if he would have chosen Georgia, even if there wouldn't have been the off the field hiccups that were there, man, this thing wouldn't be over. You'd still be talking about how solid is the Zachary Evans commitment. Yeah. When is he going to go to LSU? When is he going to go to Texas A&M? Is he going to take any other visits? What's Georgia's backup plan? We get into this stuff a lot on the forum, and one thing that comes back to me, Brandon, is the feelings about Tank Bigsby, the feelings about this new young man Gibbs, who I hopefully it comes off that it's disparaging because I'm saying I don't think he's one of the top 5 or top 6 running backs in the country. That's just the way Georgia recruits at that signature position. But with all this thing, and everybody starts scanning down the list, and whether, a lot of these names, the Claytons, the Lloyds, the Cheneys, or whether they're good fits for the Bulldogs, I keep coming back to Kobe Pryor out of Cedartown, the one that Clemson went all in early on, and they sent out that offer. Georgia took a look at him during the spring evaluation period, and they secured Kobe Pryor out of Cedartown from the state of Georgia. That was an early call by Clemson in order to lock down a guy that had some Georgia ties. And that's another name with the second running back in the class that he checks more of the boxes for Georgia guys compared to others. And, I think most people are just waiting on more news cycles to come forward. Does Lloyd make a visit? Does Cheney make a visit? Does Rashad Clayton make a visit? Those are the sort of things that everyone's going to look for. But, Brandon, the only thing I can certainly say is there will be some uncertainty about the second running back for Georgia, even in late November and early December.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Jeff, and I think that's a pretty good piece of analysis all the way around. Let me do one more thing before we let you go. You surprised me a couple of weeks ago when you mentioned the name Jaden DeLore, a quarterback out of Hawaii, as a potential second quarterback for Georgia in its 2020 class. I did not expect Georgia, given a year in which numbers are limited, I didn't expect Georgia to take 2 quarterbacks for this class, but you said watch out for DeLore being a name that Georgia might be interested in. Well, now DeLore has committed to Washington State, and obviously Mike Leach, given some of the stuff that he did with Gardner Minshew, that's going to, and other quarterbacks as well, but Minshew most recently, that's going to make Leach an incredibly attractive coach for a quarterback to work with. And if I've got my timeline correct, DeLore essentially committed to Washington State almost on the spot once he got the offer there from the Cougars. Does this end Georgia's pursuit of DeLore? And if so, does this end Georgia's pursuit of a second quarterback? Is Georgia still alive in this recruitment? Georgia's flipped plenty of guys before. I guess, where do things stand with this player that I hadn't even heard of as recently as like 2 weeks ago, who's now committed somewhere else? What is up with Georgia and a potential second 2020 quarterback?
Yeah, I think that's still a reality that will be addressed maybe around scholarship slot 22, 23, maybe the best players available. It seemed to me like, Brandon, this one, and the young man told me he had some very strong affinity for Georgia. It was just going to be hard to take him unofficial given that he's in Hawaii. And it would seem to me like, Brandon, once he got a really true gem of an offer, he currently only had San Diego State and Hawaii. Once he really got a true gem of an offer, he wanted to jump to it. And that might be one of those things that would only get reevaluated should bigger offers come about. Now, Georgia had been recruiting him for quite some time prior to, a lot of the talk in these recent offers. Georgia was, quite frankly, Brandon, I think Georgia's trying to keep the fires burning with a lot of 2020 quarterbacks. You read about some names on the West Coast as far as what's going to happen with Jake Fromm. These things are all parallels to one another because you have to sense that, Fromm exiting the team after another successful junior season, it's still going to be an equity in the quarterback room, especially when the eligibility window for Stetson Bennett. His clock for the NCAA started in 2017, the same time that Fromm's did. So he has a redshirt season to work with, but there's also the uncertain health of Dwan Mathis. I think that will be continued vigilant pursuit of a potential second quarterback in the 2020 class. And, Georgia, they like to find a quarterback that will also enroll early and be there for spring drill.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. All right, Jeff, I'm looking forward to being with you in Knoxville tomorrow, our Pella Window post-game show after the game, and, of course, plenty of stuff all in and around Neyland Stadium on Saturday. Looking forward to doing that with you. Hope you are ready for it there as well, and I will see you then.
All right, Brandon. Hey, everybody have a safe trip up to Knoxville, and we'll see everybody up there.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Let me just say this really quickly about Gardner Minshew, and I know y'all don't care, but I'll keep this quick. The work that Leach did with Minshew last year, it's hard to put into words just how impressive it is. Now, I don't think Leach as a coach works in the SEC. I think he's a little bit of a clown. I think the way that he called out his own players last week, that would sit so poorly with so many, high-placed boosters and alumni when it comes to the SEC. Leach as a personality doesn't work here. It's why John Curry essentially got ran out the door at Tennessee for even reaching out to him. I just think he's a total non-starter as a coach in the SEC. But the work that he did with Minshew last year is kind of impressive. I bring this up because Jane DeLora is now committed to Washington State. Minshew, when he was at East Carolina, at one point in time it was thought that he was going to leave there and just go be like the third-string quarterback at Alabama. I can promise you, based on the reports at the time, that Minshew setting NCAA records as a starting quarterback was not really on his radar. Being a starting quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars was not really on his radar at the time. All of that changed for him last year on the Palouse. Pretty impressive work there by Leach with Minshew, and it's not that much of a surprise, I guess, that Jaden DeLara wants to be a part of that. All right, let's turn our attention to some of the big games this weekend not involving Georgia. We'll get back to Georgia before we're done. And if you don't mind, put this in the comment section if you're watching on video. And if you're listening, I'd love to hear from you as well. You can tweet me at DawgNation Daily. Jeff Sentell said 30,000 Georgia fans in Knoxville on Saturday. That seems like a lot to me. Frankly, 20,000 Georgia fans seems like a little bit of a stretch. I'm curious to think how many y'all think is going to be there. And does anybody really think that Georgia has anything close to a checkerboard on Saturday? Put those in the comment section. I'll try to read a few of those before we're done with the regular portion of our broadcast. For now, though, let's do our MyBookie best bets. Our friends at MyBookie, you're watching games. Sometimes it's more fun to get some action down on a game. Like last night, Seattle, L.A., some of the baseball stuff, probably heartbroken over the Braves. Well, you can get in and get a bet down on all that with my friends at MyBookie. They've got incredible player perks. They've got some fantasy stuff. You can kind of, bet over-under on the fantasy points. If you're kind of a guy that got started in fantasy, you want to transition the world of betting, MyBookie makes it really easy for you to do all that as well. And speaking of making it easy, how about this great perk in particular for DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers? You can get a first deposit bonus. You can get it doubled in some cases. You can get up to $1,000. But you got to use the promo code DawgNation. It's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. Use the promo code DawgNation, and you can get a big-time first deposit bonus at MyBookie. You just simply find MyBookie in your browser, type MyBookie. You find them, you're in, and you can play, and you can win after that. MyBookie, but you got to use the promo code DawgNation. All right, let's take a look at some of the top games here for this weekend for a moment. I'll rattle through my picks quickly. I realize you don't necessarily care a ton about these, but I'll try to do it kind of quick. Auburn's at Florida. It's amazing how much this point spread has changed compared to where it would have been a couple of weeks ago, where Florida almost certainly would have been a favorite at home. Now Auburn is a favorite on the road against a top 10 team after not being favored against a relatively middling Texas A&M team a couple of weeks ago. The fortunes have really improved for the Tigers. Normally I don't like being on the side of the public this much, but in the case of Auburn, I got to be. I think the defense is too much for Florida on Saturday. I do think this coaching matchup is really interesting. Dan Mullen trying to coach around his team's biggest weakness, its offensive line, putting the ball in the hands of Kyle Trask, I guess, and asking him to do kind of a lot given how difficult it is to run on Auburn and how challenged Florida is in that regard anyway. I also talked to you yesterday about the fun that Gus Malzahn seems to be having calling plays again. Well, the Florida defense can also pose some challenges as well. That front seven's pretty good. Reese, the linebacker, I think really good. Zuniga back healthy again. C.J. Henderson, the defensive back, also back healthy again as well. Florida, for the most part, is at full strength the first time now in a while. I think this is actually a pretty good game. I've been down on Florida for months. I'm not changing my tune here. I like Auburn, but as I said to start our show, for Georgia fans curious what the month of November is going to look like, one way or another, this game will give you a little bit of a hint of what awaits Georgia after the month of October, where it's going to be a huge favorite. November presents some challenges. Florida and Auburn will showcase that a little bit themselves. Vanderbilt at Ole Miss. I think the West is better than the East right now. That's reason enough to take the Rebels. I'll take them -7. I'm completely done with Jim Harbaugh. I know Iowa's the squarest dog in the world right now, but give me the Hawkeyes plus the 3.5 in Ann Arbor. Texas against West Virginia. I think this is a Texas team that's focused at the moment. They're 11.5-point favorite in Morgantown. They lost as a double-digit favorite last year at Kansas, but this is a team that's got a lot to play for. Oklahoma next week. I actually think Texas is not looking ahead. I think they're pretty focused on this game for the moment. Give me the Longhorns minus 11.5. Ohio State, I'm going to keep going against them because at some point in time, I think they come back down to earth. I don't think you get a trophy for being September national champions. At some point in time, I think there's a sputter coming there. I don't feel great about Sparty, but I'll take them plus 20 here. And then one more big national game. Give me Jacob Eason on the road. I know Washington's really struggled at Stanford in recent years, but give me Eason here tomorrow. I didn't have great stats a week ago, but I look to him to get back on track. I look for Washington once again to be one of these teams that's going to have something to play for. Give me them, and we'll make those your MyBookie best bets. And good luck to you playing there with MyBookie there this weekend. Use the promo code DawgNation when you do. All right, so we'll get a couple of your comments in a moment because I'm genuinely curious about your feelings about how many Georgia fans show up in Neyland Stadium on Saturday. Before that, though, we think about Kroger. We always think about getting ready for the weekend. I know many of you, if you're not going to be in Neyland Stadium on Saturday, you got big plans for watch parties. You got a lot of people coming over your house, or just got a lot of things like that going on. Well, Kroger's a great way to kind of get ready for that, kick off the weekend with them. But also, let's talk about Dog Nation's weekend here for a moment as part of our Kroger kickoff. For us, it gets going on video tomorrow for the first time around 4:30. Now, I'd love to say we get there in Knoxville early enough tomorrow, walk around the Tennessee River, see a little bit of the Navy, look, Calhoun's Connor's shaking his head no. He doesn't think that timeline's going to work out, but I wouldn't mind soaking in a little bit of the scene tomorrow, especially given the fact there are going to be so many Georgia fans there potentially anyway. But one way or another, we'll tweet out where the dog walk is once we find out, and we'll be live on video around 4:30 tomorrow. Kickoff, as you know, 7 p.m. for Georgia, Tennessee there in Neyland Stadium. And then immediately after the game, we'll have player interviews first, but then after that will be Pella Window post-game show on the field there at Neyland Stadium, right there from the checkerboard end zone, hopefully talking about a big Georgia victory. It's all a part of our Kroger kickoff coming up throughout the day on Saturday. And, of course, we're glad to have you part of you for all of that. And as I said before, you're getting ready for a big tailgate at Neyland. You're getting ready for a big watch party at your house. Kroger, the great place to stock up on all of that. Let me give you a big deal right now. How about buy one, get one of equal or lesser value free on pork back ribs? Great savings there. Also, Doritos. Boy, my kids would love that. They could eat their body weight in Doritos, I think. They can get Doritos right now, though, for $1.99 per bag when you buy two. So great savings right now at Kroger, so make sure you check that out. All right, we got a couple minutes left here as part of our regular broadcast. So as promised, I'll pop over here and get a couple of your comments. I'm curious to hear how many of you guys think, how many fans do you think are going to be there for Georgia on Saturday? Devin Glenn says 30,000 in Neyland Stadium on YouTube. 30,000. Is it really that much? I mean, that's almost a Georgia-Florida crowd. I mean, that's almost what Georgia has in Jacksonville every year. Could it really possibly be that much? Man, that seems like an awful lot. Does the Facebook crowd over here agree? We'll kind of find out from them a little bit too. Is there really a possibility there's that many people there coming up on Saturday? By the way, Matthew McGahee says don't buy the Auburn hype. So on the subject of the other big SEC game on Saturday, he's not buying into that. Miriam Martin Corbin says, I'm going to get up to Knoxville in time to see some of this game. Yeah, I would imagine Miriam says she's going to be watching some of the Florida-Auburn game from her tailgate in Knoxville before the game begins. I imagine if you walk around the Tennessee River, Calhoun's, or any of that kind of stuff around the Knoxville area, my guess is you will see a good bit of tailgate TVs tuned in to that Florida-Auburn game. Tennessee doesn't like either team. At least certainly more so Florida, I guess, than Auburn. For a lot of Georgia fans, they'll be very curious about what it's going to look like. Willie Gray says 41,000 Georgia fans on Saturday. J.C. Howell says over 30,000 for sure. Man, some of y'all are very optimistic, and also very specific as well. Bill Coon says 38,012, including me. So Bill's got this down to a pretty specific number. It will be very interesting to see how this plays out. One way or another, I will be a part of that crowd dressed in red and black tomorrow, and if you were there, I hope we get a chance to bump into each other and say hello. We'll try to tweet you out where the dog walk's going to be, and then talk to you throughout the day on the forum and at DawgNation.com and there on video, and who knows what happens after the game is done. So we'll look forward to seeing all of you there for that. All right, do I have time to say one quick thing before we do our Gator Hater Updater? So I've seen, it's amazing how much media chatter there's been this week about the SEC divisions, or just divisions in college football in particular. And I'm guessing that a lot of the national folks who've written about this have done so on the basis of the fact that Florida and Auburn play, and they have not played. I think its first trip to Gainesville since 2007, I think. So it's been a long time there for these two teams. Let me be kind of the voice in the wilderness on this. I don't care a rip about any other conference's divisions. I still like the SEC East and the SEC West. I think the SEC's done a pretty good job of giving specific identities to its two divisions. That kind of matters to me. And while it's kind of cool to see two teams play that haven't played in a while, it's also kind of cool to see teams play when they have a lot of history and backstory because they play each and every year. So frankly, I kind of like both scenarios. Nonetheless, Gator Hater Updater, 1,070 days. We'll see you back here Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, hope you are doing well today. We got a little bit of time for comments. We're going to kind of roll through as many of these as quickly as we can and then let you get on with your weekend. And if you're getting ready to head up to Knoxville on Saturday, we'll certainly give you a chance to do that. And curious to get your thoughts on the game. Talk about the crowd, we can do that. Talk a little Florida-Auburn, we can do that too. More thoughts on how Georgia gets it done. Plenty of opportunity to kind of do all of that here today. So let's find out what people are thinking. Marshall Fleming says, if any of y'all are tailgating, shoot me a message where you're tailgating. Yeah, I'd love to see some DawgNation Daily folks kind of meet up with each other and get a chance to enjoy a little fellowship together. That sounds like a pretty good way to spend a Saturday afternoon before a night game there at Neyland Stadium. Bobby Taylor thinks Wisconsin's going to beat Ohio State. That's kind of an interesting take. Philip Jordan Wells says 34,000 regulars will be I don't even know what that Philip, I don't even know what that comment even means. Adrian Carver says, if my kid didn't have a soccer game in Savannah, I would have gone to Knoxville this weekend. I hope my kids know just how much I love them. Adrian, I know what you mean on that. I'm not quite to that age yet where my kids have a lot of fall Saturday conflicts, but we've kind of bumped into a couple of those during the week here recently, and it is kind of funny. You know, kids get older, they get busier, and some of that kind of stuff does kind of bump into the college football season. I know I'm not quite there yet with my kids, just given how young they are, but I also know that it's kind of on the way. Sounds like Connor Riley's ready to join us there as well. How many Georgia fans do you think are there tomorrow?
I'd say probably about 20. I think that feels fair.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing I keep trying to stress is 20 is more than a lot. 20 is an obscene number. You know, think about all the hype that existed for Georgia and Notre Dame. I mean, the best I could tell, there weren't much more than 10,000 Notre Dame fans. There may have only been 8. Which was the allotted number of tickets they have. It's not like there was some outsized number of Notre Dame fans, and they're supposed to have this like national fan base and, maybe, the kind of, alumni that have the means to travel wherever their team is playing, even expensive tickets and kind of, remote venue like Athens is, at least when it comes to, travel and everything else. But there wasn't some outsized number of Notre Dame fans there. Georgia probably had 20 last year at LSU, and that's what I'm basing this on. But that's also kind of a weekend deal. It's New Orleans. It's everything like that. If Georgia really has 20, that's not enough to checkerboard the stadium, but that's twice. I mean, I don't want to get too exaggerative here, but other than Nebraska, which really filled Colorado Stadium at the beginning of the year, LSU, which really filled Vanderbilt much the same way that Georgia kind of did, although it's probably a little less. 20,000 is more than twice of what almost any school takes to any away game. There are just not that many power programs taking 20,000 fans to away games anymore.
Right.
It's not the vogue thing that it used to be.
Right, and Georgia plays Tennessee in Knoxville every other year, so it's not really like this is a special trip Georgia's won, I believe, 7 of the last 9 times they've played Tennessee. And, were it not for a horrific Nick Chubb injury and a Hail Mary, they'll have won 9 straight, and they're going to be big favorites again on Saturday. It's not like it's a top 10 game. So I do, and one other thing, we sort of talked about this with the pink out. Based on social media, you thought it would have been close to around like 80-90% of participation, and it was probably closer to 30 or 40,
which is still an impressive number.
Right? No, yeah. I'm just, to me, if you give me the satisfaction of finishing, the larger, sometimes social media is not a fair representation of what everyone is out there doing in the real world, and I think we might see that this week in Tennessee.
It is kind of funny that you say it that way, because I've heard a lot more people on social media say they're going to the game than I have bumped into real human beings in the flesh who've said that they are going. So I guess take that for what it's worth, but a lot of our commenters have said they'll be there, both on Facebook and YouTube, so maybe that's kind of worth something in that regard. Let me also kind of throw this out there. Connor kind of made the case why some fans would not go. Let me see if I can say this without people thinking I'm giving Tennessee a compliment, because this is not my intention. Am I wrong for thinking of Neyland Stadium as a historic venue? I mean, to me, I'm actually semi-excited about being in the stadium tomorrow. Sitting where it sits on the river, checkerboard end zone. Certainly me growing up, this was certainly, kind of a big stadium, a stadium that I really grew up with, a stadium that really mattered. Hasn't been that way in a long time, and I'm certainly not looking to give Tennessee a compliment here. But I think of this as one of the stadiums that I kind of like seeing. Am I wrong for saying this is a little bit of a historic venue?
No, in a general sense. I think if you're someone who's never been to Neyland Stadium, it is a cool place to see. Now, you being in the press box, I believe this will be your first time in the press box.
I have never sat in that press box.
You're going to be sitting in the clouds.
I have heard that.
Boy, oh boy, is it high up there.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And sort of, from the field level looking up, it's sort of like, one of those European Gothic cathedrals where literally the stadium, because, Sanford Stadium sort of goes like that. It's sort of more like a shallow bowl. Neyland Stadium goes straight up.
Yeah.
So, if you've never been or it's your first time, yes, it is a historic stadium. But I go back to, there are a good amount of Georgia fans who've made the trip to Neyland Stadium. And it's kind of, I don't think a lot of people are going to be, it's a great trip every time you go there. It's kind of, you go there once, you've seen it, and you sort of can move on from there.
Yeah, you may be right about that. I mean, let me make a comparison for a moment. I don't think of Bryant-Denny Stadium as being a historic venue. Now, obviously, Alabama has done a bunch of winning there lately. But, when I'm growing up, Alabama was playing a lot of games at Legion Field. Bryant-Denny only became their every game home, kind of, later on. For instance, up until 89, I want to say every Iron Bowl was played at Legion Field as an example of this. So, I think of Neyland as being historic in a way that not every SEC stadium necessarily is. It's certainly recognizable. There are plenty of SEC stadiums that if you turned on the game, you kind of wouldn't know what stadium you're in unless you saw the teams playing. But, Sanford Stadium because of the hedges, Neyland Stadium because of the checkerboard. There are a couple of stadiums that are immediately identifiable. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's maybe what I mean as much as I mean historic. It's a easily recognizable college football landmark, I believe.
Yeah, and I certainly think that's fair, but I just don't know if that's going to get any more Georgia fans to want to go out and go to that game as much as it is. I think a lot of this stems from Tennessee's down. Let's sort of kick it and stick it to them. I think that's certainly where this checkerboard idea came from. And I think maybe that's what's sort of fueling it, and as a way to maybe try and, get this game hyped up is to sort of kick an already down program even further.
GB2's got a really good comment. He says, BA, everybody's talking about how many Georgia fans are going to be there, but how about the Vols fans? He says, over under 50,000 Vols fans. I say 55, then by the third quarter it drops to 10. I agree with your last sentiment. I think you're probably right about that. It may be a little bit of a depressed crowd. Tennessee's had a hard time filling that stadium now for quite some time. That's not even that well kept of a secret anymore. They've really struggled with attendance. However, maybe I'm just making Georgia-Tennessee out to be more than it really is in 2019. But I think the opponent brings some Vols fans out on Saturday. I mean, in a stadium that holds, is it 105 or 110?
I believe it is 105.
In a stadium that holds 105. There's got to be at least 90,000 people there, right?
Well, I believe the Florida game was in Florida this year.
Yeah.
Alabama game is in Alabama, so of these sort of traditionally big games for Tennessee, this is sort of the biggest home game that they have this year. So I do sort of think that would be a game that because it's this marquee opponent, it's a game that's sort of been circled on here for a while. And, going into the season, a lot of people, one of us on here on this set thought, Tennessee was going to take a step forward and make a leap and get better. That person.
I said they might make a bowl game.
You were pretty emphatic when you said they were going to make a bowl game. You said some very nice things about Jared Garantano.
Well, and the tweet we said on the show this week of what's his name that covers the team that was kind of talking about
David Ubben.
Yeah, I'm gonna blame Jim Chaney for Jared Garantano's fall. I feel like that's the out that I need to kind of get out from underneath my Garantano take. By the way, Mike D says, "BA, this is not a playoff game. Stop making this out to be more than it is." Maybe I am doing that. Green Soldier says he thinks there are going to be 105,000 people there on Saturday. He may be right about that. Here's what I'll say, and I mentioned this to Jeff, and then after that we're going to take some Facebook comments. I think there'll be enough Tennessee fans there where if Georgia gets off to a slow start, and gosh knows I hope that doesn't happen, I know you all do as well, but there'll be enough Tennessee fans there on Saturday that if Georgia gets off to a slow start, this turns into a hostile stadium. If Georgia does what it's supposed to do, like it did in 2017, I believe we'll see aluminum bleachers by halftime. But let Georgia stub its toe a little bit at the beginning of the game, special teams miscue, stuff that you've kind of already lived through this season, then we're talking about a crowd that's still making noise in the second quarter. And that to me is going to be the game within the game of how quickly does this Tennessee crowd get permission to go home.
Yeah, it's other than the Notre Dame game, Georgia has started pretty fast, but you look at some of those road/neutral environment starts. Georgia didn't exactly start fast last year against Florida. They didn't really start at all against LSU. And you go back to Auburn in 2017, they didn't start fast there. And, Jake Fromm in 2017 did not play well when he went up to Neyland Stadium. Yeah. So, history says Georgia's been a little slow coming out of the gates on the road, but I do think this is a different Georgia team. And I think, they know this week in particular, it could be a hostile crowd if you give them an opportunity to get into it. And because of that, I think they're going to want to, and given some of the criticism that's been out there about the Georgia passing offense and James Coley, I do wonder if early on we see them go for a lot of deep shots, a lot of chunk plays to sort of show, hey, well, actually, guys, we can do this, and we're just choosing to be selective in when we go about it.
Let me get Steve Shaffini's comment, then I want to respond to you. Steve says, Tennessee's got nothing to play for, and I don't really like that. Let's not make the same mistake we did with Notre Dame. Got to knock them out early. And so I think that's kind of interesting from Steve there, because I do think that in retrospect it seems like Georgia fans downgraded Notre Dame too much, and I think there's some national, non-Georgia fans who'd say UGA fans may have overvalued their own team there that day. You can decide for yourself if that was true or not, but, Steve makes an interesting point. Connor, I wish I was as confident in you that Kirby Smart would play the hits when it comes to the play calling here. I'm inclined to almost go the opposite way. Of Kirby Smart sends a message of, hey, I'm the one that's still coaching this team. I'm the one that's got the theoretical play card in my hand, and we're going to keep running the football because that's what I think is best. I wish it was your way. Sometimes I wonder if it might not be a little stubbornness the other direction.
I'm not saying it's gonna that's what they're gonna come out and take shots, but I do expect 40 plus carries. And a year ago they ran for 250 yards against Tennessee, even though no one had more than 80 rushing yards in that game as an individual. And I do probably think we're going to see something similar again. Maybe DeAndre Swift can top that 100-yard mark just because I feel like Georgia feels more comfortable giving him a bigger workload this year. Mm-hmm. But I think in all likelihood, you're probably just going to see another balanced rushing attack and at most 3, maybe 4 downfield shots. Best case scenarios, you hope maybe they show off a little bit more of that tempo offense. And Tennessee has the sportsmanship / gumption to actually, try and defend it instead of going down faking concussions.
Oh, wow. I love that. Robert Barnes says, have y'all been watching Saturday in the South on the SEC Network? That's some great coverage all about the stadiums in the SEC. I've heard nothing but good things about this. I guess what I'm hoping is, and not to make this all about me, but I don't have a ton of time to sit down and watch TV the way that I used to. I'm assuming that come March and once you kind of get into the dead of the off season, I'm assuming the SEC Network's going to start running these things on a loop. Mm-hmm. Surely you don't make this content and not just play it 10,000 times. I really want to go back and see these because I've heard nothing but great things about this, but I haven't been able to see the documentaries myself. Have you seen them, Connor?
I have not. Tuesday nights I'm usually coming back from Athens pretty late.
Yeah, so I hope I get a chance to see those at some point in time. Let's see what else is going on here on Facebook here for a moment. We got Got another 10 good minutes here, so let's see if we can roll through as many as we can. By the way, rsandrews.com. Check them out for your air, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Dennis Brown says Fromm needs 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. I'd be very happy with that. I'd be very happy. Jeremy Lloyd says BA DVR those Saturdays in the South. The problem is, if you saw my DVR, I'm a very ambitious DVRer. The stuff I have DVR'd, thinking I'm ever one day going to watch. So, unfortunately, DVRing it doesn't make it any easier for me to get it watched.
Is there anything on there, and this is getting a little bit away from football, but is there anything out there in the television entertainment universe where you're watching it live, you say, I have to go ahead and just, I have to make time in my own schedule to get this first run?
That's a good question. Am I still watching anything live? Almost nothing, because like one thing that makes me different than many of y'all is, and I'll make this quick. I essentially sleep like a barnyard animal. I go to bed very early and I wake up very early. So like last night, I fell asleep. I was trying to stay up for the end of the Rams and Seahawks game, and I fell asleep. But I hit the record button before I went to sleep, so I wake up at like 5 a.m. I'm sitting down having a little bit of breakfast. Rams have the football going on what was trying to be a game-winning drive. So even a lot of times, a lot of sports I'm actually not watching live anymore. The only thing I probably still watch live is, I'm talking about other than, live in its totality, is the college football window until it's over on Saturday night. That's something I'm still watching live. Other than that, the Nationals playoff game, the one they won against Milwaukee the other night, I watched that recorded the next morning, early in the morning. I'm not even watching that much sports all the way live anymore, just because I go to bed so early.
Yeah, the NFL and that sort of late evening, usually it's a Pac-12 game between two not-so-great Pac-12 teams. So this week we do get Stanford-Washington as a 10:30 kickoff. So, we'll be wrapping up, and hopefully we can catch sort of the end of that, and Jacob Eason and Stanford and Davis Mills, another Georgia, a quarterback from the state of Georgia that is, in my opinion, worth keeping an eye on. But I watched, so Survivor is the one TV show.
Yeah, you're a big Survivor fan.
Live every week, because I don't have, I just don't have a DVR. So I'm watching Survivor every week, and then Succession on HBO. Those are the two things. And, NFL football from 1 p.m. on Sunday to 11:30 when the game ends. I'm glued to that.
Apropos of nothing, let me also say this. Do you know what I've really fallen in love with this year that I've never felt this way before? I've become a huge, and Kevin Mills, I'm going to get your comment in a moment, on Facebook. I've become a huge fan of Friday night college football, and I never thought I'd be there.
It's been a pretty good slate this year as well.
It's been a good slate tonight. Historic Nippert Stadium for the Bearcats hosting UCF. That could be a lot of fun. The Penn State,
like Cincinnati in that game.
I do too. I do very much so. The Penn State Maryland game wasn't as good last week as I thought it would have been. The week before that, there was a Pac-12 game that was really good.
USC Utah.
USC Utah. Thank you. I am sort of morally opposed to college football on a Friday because I think of that as a high school night. I gotta say this. That's the one night a week where my family and I, we all go to a restaurant. We can just kind of, it's like our downtime. It's our relaxation time. Coming home and flipping on that Friday night college football, if you're not doing that, I know, listen, some of y'all are clubbing on Fridays, and I'm not telling you to stay home if you've got a big, a social calendar. But if you're like me and usually propping your feet up on Fridays anyway, that college football on Friday nights has turned out to be really pretty fun.
Right, and the thing I like about it is, it's usually not like a super huge game. It's not a game between two top 10 ranked matchups, but it's a good game. You can throw it on in the background and while you're doing other stuff, if you're ordering out a pizza and you're just hanging out with your kids, or you're going to a bar or something like that. And then if the game gets good, theoretically you can just dive in, and usually it's late enough at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
You can really dive into that and sort of enjoy it. And I do, and because obviously the NFL now has just taken over Thursday night football. But I think Friday night there's a little niche there for college football, even though I know a lot of people will say it's for high schoolers.
Willie Gray says, Bia, do you honestly think we'll ever have another Heisman Trophy? Georgia, we don't seem to run a single back enough, and we don't have a 1,000-yard receiver. So I know it seems, first of all, Pete Futag was on our show one time, said it very well. It's hard for anyone to win the Heisman, so the odds against every player not winning the award are always going to be greater than the odds of winning. And even for the guys who are hyped up right now, last year, 2/3 of the way through the season, it seemed like a lock that Tua Tagovailoa would win the award, and he ended up not doing it. So Heisman campaigns change a lot over the course of the year. But the specific question at hand, can a Georgia player win it? I actually think whether it happens this year or happens whenever, Georgia players to me are very much alive for the Heisman Trophy, despite the fact that for the most part Georgia kind of spreads the wealth offensively right now because it is an offensive award, even though it probably shouldn't be. Here's the reason why. Even though some fans don't necessarily feel this way, Georgia's a little bit of a media darling. They get cushy TV spots now. They get big ratings for those games. I mean, look at the love that Jake Fromm gets from the national media. I know some Georgia fans think there's been too much hype for other quarterbacks, including Fields, who used to be here. But there's no shortage of positive attention for Fromm either. So I think that Georgia, given the fact that we do this for a living, so we look at a lot of metrics. The Georgia fan base is huge, and it's very close geographically to a big metro area, even though sometimes it seems like Georgia doesn't recruit the metro area as well as they could. The point is, there are a lot of Georgia fans. It's a pretty attractive demographic. Therefore, the media pays attention to Georgia. And because of that, I think a player, whether it be Fromm or Swift this year, or a Fromm or Swift in a future year, I don't think that Georgia is excluded from the Heisman conversation, even though this is kind of an ensemble cast offense. I think a Georgia player is very much alive for the award because of the reasons that I just mentioned. Do you agree?
I would say that DeAndre Swift, in my estimation, is very much in the running for this award. I thought he had a really good game against Notre Dame, and if he's able to break one big run there, and I think we're sort of talking about him differently, and if he can sort of replicate that against a Florida, against an Auburn, against an Alabama or an LSU, or an Auburn again in the SEC championship game, he's almost – I'd be pretty surprised if he isn't in New York, just given – there's a real good chance he has a chance to be the best offensive player on potentially the best team in college football, and that's usually at least enough to get an invite. And, it might be tough with Tua and the numbers that he's putting up, but if Georgia's the lone SEC team in the college football playoff this year, there's a compelling case to be made for DeAndre Swift as potentially the best player from the best conference in the country. So I certainly, while I sort of understand, why a Georgia player might not win it, I think based on what we saw in the Notre Dame game, I'm actually a little bit bullish on maybe what Swift can do.
I think it's a good take. Somebody asked earlier, and I forgot, I mentioned the name earlier, now I don't see the comment anymore, but it was, do I prefer to watch games on TV or be in the stadium? And I'm reckoning until the day that I die, I'm just going to like being in the stadium. I wish I could get out of that press box tomorrow and go sit in the stands just so I could, feel the moment. But it's a hassle to go to the games. Parking's miserable. It gets expensive over time. Even for media over the course of the long haul, it ends up being kind of an expensive proposition, even when you're not having to buy the tickets to go to the game. However, hassle, expense, for me, everything else, I reckon I'm just always going to really like being in the stadium. It gets more and more popular to watch these games on TV every single year because the TV technology enhances and really grows exponentially over the course of time. But I reckon for as long as there's going to be games, if I have a choice, I'm going to be in the stadium to watch the game, especially Georgia games. I just love being in that stadium, man. I love that stadium.
How snobbish is it of me to say I love being in the stadium if I'm in the press box, or more importantly, actually on the field level, sort of working the game, as opposed to sort of being in the stadium as a fan?
Maybe a little bit snobbish, but I do kind of understand where you're coming from, the standpoint of the one thing that's tricky about college football attendance is, a lot of those are just aluminum bleachers, and you're sitting really, really close to people. And admittedly, I haven't done here's like 12 inches of space to fit my huge body into. I haven't done that as much lately. That's probably a little bit hard. We've all had game experiences where an obnoxious fan has ruined it for us. Some of us have had experiences where we're the obnoxious fan ruining it for somebody else. We won't tell those stories necessarily. So I do know that the in-stadium environment can be ruined sometimes by the circumstances around you. Admittedly, the press box at Georgia is a really nice seat. It's a great, great view, very, very comfortable. Other press boxes, for the most part, have kind of gotten antiseptic. Don't enjoy those as much anymore. I do think that there is and this is one of the reasons why I always try to take myself kind of off the media ivory tower and put myself with the people. I do think there's a certain I think once you stop being a fan, or once you don't have any connection with how fans experience football games or sports in general, I think it gives you a really warped perspective of how you talk to the people that are consuming sports.
Right, and I still like being in the stadium environment. I think you learn and you see more and you pick up things as opposed to just watching at home on TV. From a field level, I I think I certainly, and maybe it's just because I have a pretty good football IQ in terms of what to watch and sort of what I'm looking at, but I certainly feel like you learn more and you get a more sort of a much better understanding just seeing guys and seeing people live. You hear scouts say it all the time. You really don't know a whole lot about a guy until you really go to sort of see him in person and see him in the atmosphere, in the environment. And I mean, you sort of hit on this with the fans, but I'm just someone who, if you're the guy there screaming about James Coley's play calling during the course of the game as if you know more, you know better, I'm just sort of going to be turned off. If you're, famously, there's when I was a student a few years ago, there was a girl who every single play that I believe it was either Vanderbilt or Tennessee was running the ball, she was just screaming, "Tackle him!" And I just,
as if they're not trying to.
And I couldn't you couldn't identify her and figure because there were just so many people there, and it was just every single time without fail. And so it's some of that stuff that takes the enjoyment of watching a football game away from me because watching football is one of my absolute favorite hobbies.
Yeah. Gary and Christian Gilsano on a different subject. This is a good question. It says, BA, if you had to choose one, and this is going back to preseason predictions, Texas A&M to be way worse than you thought, which is certainly true right now, or Florida to be way better than you thought, which one would you want to be the case? I hope y'all appreciate the honesty with which I approach topics like this because on the one hand, I'm going to try to provide you the best analysis that I can. In some cases, that's kind of seemingly coming from a pro-Georgia perspective. I don't think Florida's very good. In some cases, it's not. I do think Auburn's pretty good, and obviously there are plenty of my audience that hates Auburn worse than it hates Florida. So there's going to be the analytical side of my brain. There's also going to be the emotional side of my brain. I'm going to be very honest right now from the emotional side of my brain. I really don't want Florida to be good. I really think it's a huge advantage to Georgia to have an easy division. And you know what? I don't want to have to come on here and give Florida any credit for anything. My cognitive pick, to the best that I can provide analysis, is that Auburn, LSU, some of the teams that Florida's about to play are truly better than the Gators. I really hope that's true though, because let's face it. We're all going to be wrong a lot. Professional gamblers only get picks correct about 55% of the time. That's about what you need to.
That's a good mark.
Get to turn a profit. So we're all going to be wrong plenty. There's a chance that I'm wrong about Florida. I don't believe that I am. But there's certainly a chance that I will be. However, emotionally, I really don't want to be. I really, really like Georgia being in a sort of a position of dominance over them in particular, but also I just think it's a real ally in your pursuit of a national championship, knowing that you won't be challenged in your division the way that Alabama might be challenged in its, with Auburn being pretty good right now and LSU being pretty good right now. So Gary, as honest as I can be about anything, analytically, I believe that Florida's going to lose on Saturday. I believe they're going to lose at least 2 more times before the season's done, maybe more, maybe one additional time beyond that. However, emotionally, I really, really want to be right about this.
I want to answer this question. I want Florida to keep thinking that they're good. A lot of people are on Auburn this week, and I picked Auburn in our R. Sanders show that's coming up at noon today on the DawgNation Facebook and YouTube pages. I picked Auburn, but the more and more I think on this, I just feel like Mullen might be able to pull something out. He's 3-1 straight up as an underdog in his time at Florida there, and I just think Auburn might be out getting ahead of its skis a little bit. They're coming off a big win. They looked really impressive at home a week ago. It's a freshman quarterback going on the road and going against a pretty good defensive line that's going to be able to put pressure on him. And I wonder if we're putting too much on Auburn right now, and I think Florida might be able to pull out a win. But, I still, from what I've seen, I'm still not confident in this Florida team.
If this was Team A playing Team B instead of Auburn playing Florida, this is Team A playing Team B, 2 random teams somewhere in the country, and if I had made as big a bet with my wallet as I've made with my mouth on Auburn, I'd probably be hedging it monetarily just a little bit because I'm just a contrarian by nature, and it's hard to support Auburn right now as a contrarian because they're the least contrarian team in college football, at least for the moment, maybe Ohio State the other. But right now, Auburn's just not a very contrarian team, meaning everyone has complimented them over the course of the last couple of weeks. I don't like that. I don't like that. However, it's not Team A versus Team B. It's 2 teams that we feel like we pay pretty close attention to around here. And I'm going to say, for the moment, Auburn really is still as much better against Florida as I thought they were, even though now most of the public kind of agrees with that because it's a pretty big deal to be a 3-point favorite in the Swamp. That's a pretty big deal for a team that's ranked, in the top 10 right now. Let me say one more thing, too, about this subject, then we're going to get ready to get going here. Dan Riggins says that BA really knows how to stoke my Gator hater flames. It's important to remember that when we started doing the Gator hater, first it was a Gator hater countdown, turned into the Gator hater updater. The reason why we started at the beginning is kind of different than what it's evolved into. It's kind of evolved into this thing where we, on this show, kind of laugh at Florida and how goofy Dan Mullen is and how overzealous Florida fans are about a team we don't think is very good. But when we first started doing it, my point in saying, hey, you've got to set the bar at Florida. It's not Georgia Tech, a team that I've never, had very much respect for. It's Florida. You could beat Tech 20 years in a row, and as a program, that doesn't guarantee you anything. Look back at the last 20 years. Georgia has mostly won in that series and has not won a national championship along the way. However, Florida, given what it has been over the course of that same 20, 30-year period, that if you set the bar at that and you make it a goal, first goal of the season, before the East, before the SEC, before the national championship, find a way to beat Florida. I said, if you can find a way to do that more often than not over the course of a 20-year span, I believe that good things would happen for the program. I believe that if you look at the history of Auburn and Alabama, for instance, Nick Saban's hire at Alabama begat Cam Newton's arrival at Auburn, which begat Lane Kiffin's overhaul of the Alabama offense, which, kind of begat this and begat that and begat that, back and forth they go. Rivals have a way of pushing college football teams. And we first started doing the Gator hater, I thought that Florida was a necessity to push Georgia. As it turned out, it's been more Georgia just pushing Florida off the map. But it is interesting how that conversation on this show, when we started doing this in late 2015 to, I guess it would have been late 2016. Late 2016. We started doing this in late 2016 to where it is now. It is interesting how that conversation about that particular rival has evolved on the show.
Yep.
All right, let's get ready to get off the air here.
Somebody asked injury updates. Tyson Campbell's probably not going to play. He's going to be held out with a right foot injury. Solomon Kinley is probably not going to be able to go. I think Justin Schaefer is going to get the start at left guard there. Eric Stokes is expected to be back. He was at practice going through drills Monday and Tuesday of this week. And so that's sort of your quick sort of injury update on where things stand with people.
Oh, yeah, that's good stuff. How much you think Kyrus plays a lot on Saturday?
I'll be interested to see. He has been cleared. Kirby said he's going to be able to go. But I've also, I've cast my lot pretty clearly with Dominic Blaylock, and I do think, Jackson might be taking reps away from him, both as a wide receiver and as a punt returner. I probably expect Kyrus to maybe be the first guy out there as a punt returner, even though he is still somewhat nursing that hand injury, and we're not going to really know how he is until he's out there.
Very, very quickly, then we're going to get off the air. You weren't here yesterday, but we played the audio. DJ Shockley and Jordan Rogers talking about Blaylock at least a little bit. Rogers on the SEC Network that he hasn't really seen that receiver emerge yet for Georgia. Interesting to hear Shockley tout Blaylock as potentially being that guy. I think if you look at a lot of the stuff that really worked for Devontae Smith for Alabama on Saturday, it is similar to some of the stuff that Georgia has run for Blaylock this year. The outs where you take off and run, for instance. Interesting to hear Shockley kind of doubting Blaylock on the SEC Network this week.
Yeah, Kirby, Jake Fromm, Mark Webb all spoke pretty glowingly about him. And I would just add, even though he didn't play in that Vanderbilt game, right now he is Georgia's leading receiver in terms of yards. And he has a knack of sort of just getting open and finding the open space in the defense. And I think, as his reps and playing time increase and continue, I think he's going to add another element to the Georgia offense where he's pretty consistently able to pick up those 15 to 16-yard gains and sort of, create those chunk plays for Georgia.
All right, we got to get ready to go here. Huge thanks to everybody for being a part of the program. By the way, don't forget, check out AJC.com for your Atlanta news now. Unfortunately, what one of the big topics there is today, at least if you live in the Atlanta area. Disastrous loss to the Braves yesterday. I'm going to the game, actually going with our buddies from Merriweather and Tharp today. So looking forward to being there at SunTrust Park and hoping for a change in momentum after an ugly performance yesterday by the Braves. You know all the backstory. Good coverage of it at AJC.com. Get all your Atlanta news now at AJC.com. Also, keep in touch with everything happening around the Atlanta area this weekend. It's AJC.com. Huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. Our friends from R.S. Andrews kind of do all those things for us. They can do all those things for you, especially 90-plus degree temperatures again here in the month of October. You need that air conditioning system working the way that it's supposed to. Factory fresh specs. That is what R.S. Andrews can get yours back to, but you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. Thanks to y'all for being a part of our program today. Really appreciate you being here for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. I'll see you tomorrow in Knoxville and then back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily once again.